Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hello friends, today we are going to start second chapter of political science, that is federalism. What is federalism? Let me just explain this in one single line and then we'll explain the features of federalism and the things related to federalism. Federalism, remember in the previous chapter, power sharing, we discussed one form of power sharing, that is vertical distribution of power. Vertical distribution of power, remember the vertical line that we have chosen, okay, vertical line, see, this is, we call it as vertical line, and how this vertical division of power can be like the power can be divided between the union, the state and the local. Union means a center which is meant for the whole country, state meant for the state governments, and then we have local governments. So federalism, it is the government at different levels. So before starting this chapter in detail, I would like to just go back to our previous chapter, that is power sharing. We have seen the cases of Belgium and Sri Lanka. In Belgium also earlier, before its constitution, especially before 1993, they also have the central and state governments, but there the center government has all the major powers. The role of the state governments was negligible. So now, what they have done, they have made their constitution, they have made changes in their constitution 4 times, and finally they have adopted this federalism. In that they have given equal powers, they have given powers to the center as well as the state governments, which are not the subordinate of the central government. And that is why they were able to wipe out all the conflicts, all the tensions in the country which they actually had earlier. And we have seen the case of Sri Lanka also, where Tamils wanted to have federal form of system, federal form of government. But the Sinhalas, they were completely against it. And because of that, they had majoritarian form of government. And that actually led to civil war, tension, destruction, killing of people. So that is why we need power sharing. Power sharing is always based on mutual trust, cooperation, acceptance, as we have seen in the case of Belgium. But that was missing in Sri Lanka. So keeping that in mind, in this chapter, we are going to discuss the government which is there at different levels. We are giving equal power to the different levels of government, the center which is meant for the entire country. We have state governments whose duty is to look after the states, and then we have local governments which works in the rural as well as urban areas. So now we'll discuss this chapter in detail. Begin with federalism, and federalism is contrasted with another form of government known as unitary system. Okay, so federalism, as you can see in the map also, that it is a system of government in which power is divided between a central and state or provincial governments. The state governments are also known as provincial governments. Okay, the reason why we have federalism, India is a very vast country, and for administrative convenience, we have divided power among different organs of the government. Different levels of the government. Central government might not be knowing the state government, the people living in the state government. Similarly, the state government might not be knowing who are there in the local level. So for every level we have a different government, so that the the demands, the desires of the people can be fulfilled at their level. So that is why it is a system of government in which the power is divided between the central and state or provincial government. Then I told you there is a contrast between the federal and the unitary government. When we say that in federal government there are two or more levels of government, just now I told you two or more level means center, that is union, state and local. It means two or more. But under unitary government there is only one level of government, that is the national government or the central government. There can be subunits which are not independent, but they are the subordinate to the national government. Another difference between the federal and the unitary government is division of power between different levels of government. As I told you just now, different set of powers for the central government and then state and then local government. But no such division is there in the unitary government. The entire power is in the hands of national government. They are not giving any powers to their subordinate. Now the third, state governments, they are not answerable to the central or national government. They have their own jurisdiction, they have their own matters in which they have to govern the people. They are not the subordinates, they are not answerable to the central government. Whereas in the unitary government, the state governments or the subunits, they are answerable to the central government. It means they have to time give report of their working to the central government, and they cannot work on their own. For every matter they have to ask the central government. Another, jurisdiction of each government is specified in the constitution. It is the area of work, that is jurisdiction, that is basically legislation, that on which matters they have to make laws, on which areas they have to collect taxes, and about the areas of administration. It is clearly mentioned in the federal system in the constitution in the form of 3 lists of subjects, namely union list, state list and concurrent list. I'll explain these 3 lists a little later when we'll discuss about how federalism is practiced in India. For the time being, just keep that in mind that the federal government, they have a specified jurisdiction in the constitution. In the unitary system, unitary government, all powers are in the hands of central government, as I told you again and again. That these subunits, they have to take guidelines from the central government. They cannot work on their own. So the central government, they can grant powers and they can take them back anytime. But this doesn't happen in the federal form of government. Another, constitutional amendments. What are these amendments actually? Constitutional amendments, the change in the constitution. Amendment means a change. Okay, and when that change is being in the constitution known as constitutional amendments, and such amendments cannot be made without the consent of the state governments. It means the central government cannot have the monopoly to whatever they want to do, but for that they need to ask the state governments. Whereas in the unitary government, the central government alone can make constitutional amendments like an ordinary law. They don't have to ask anybody else regarding making any kind of change or amendment. Then comes the sources of revenue, the financial resources. Under the federal system, the sources of revenue are divided among different levels of government. Center has their own taxes through which they collect income. Similarly, the state also have their certain taxes through which they get income. So both have their own sources of revenue through which they use it for the administration. Now, as far as unitary system is concerned, all the sources of revenue are controlled by the central government. No such divisions in the sources of revenue as far as center and state is concerned. So we have seen that under federal system, each and every single level, they have their own power, jurisdiction, according to which they govern. Now, we discuss the features. So before discussing features, we discuss two very important questions. That is, what is meant by federalism? What are the differences between the federal and unitary system? Okay. Now comes the next and the very important question as far as CBSE exams are concerned. It is the features of the federalism. First major feature, two or more levels of government. As I told you in the definition, known as the vertical division of power. Yes, two or more level. Two level union, state, that is two, and the third is local. That is two or more levels of government. Second, separate jurisdiction. As I told you, under the difference between that, in the matters of legislation and taxation and administration, in these matters, both the center and the state, they have their own jurisdiction. They have their own laws on which they have their own subjects in which they have to make laws. That is known as union list, state list and concurrent list. Okay, and they have their own taxes. That is their sources of revenue. Okay, next, the third important feature of federalism is guarantee of the constitution for separate jurisdiction. It is a guarantee. No government can take away the powers of other. Like the central government cannot take away the powers of state government. Similarly, state government cannot interfere in the working of center government. So each level of government, they have separate jurisdiction, which is mentioned in the constitution, and it cannot be changed unilaterally by the central government. All changes, the fundamental provisions has to be changed or amended, not by central government alone. Second point, next point, that is the amendment to the constitution. No government, center or state, can amend means change, the constitution alone. They need to get the consent and approval of both types of government, that is center and state, needed for amendments to the constitution, especially the fundamental provisions. If some very fundamental change is required to have a more state, to include another state in the Indian Union, they need to first consult, get the approval of the state governments also. So nothing can be done unilaterally. Okay, next is the interpretation of the constitution. In matters of dispute, there can be dispute between the center and the state. So solve such cases, we have a federal court, and that federal court is known as the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is also known as the apex court. Known as the apex court. It is the highest judicial authority. Everyone has to accept the decision given by the Supreme Court, and the matters related to the government can directly goes to the Supreme Court. And do you know that under such matters, Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. It means the cases related to center and state or between two state government will directly go to the Supreme Court. Generally, we have a system like first we go to subordinate court, then High Court, then Supreme Court. But for the cases related to the governments, center state or between two state government, such matters directly goes to the Supreme Court. Okay, this is the another feature. And then we have sources of revenue. As I told you in the difference between the federal and unitary, I told you that both the levels of government, they have their own sources, they have their own financial autonomy. Okay, central government, they have their own resources, they have their own finances which they use for the purpose of administration. Similarly, state government also have their own sources of revenue which they used for the administration and for the development of their state. Okay, now the last is the dual objective. There is the two objectives of federalism. Number one, safeguard and promote unity of the country. India is a land of diversities and every single state in our country is different from one another in terms of language, in terms of culture. But this federal system gives and promotes and safeguards the unity of the country by involving everyone involving everyone for the governance of the country. And then another is to accommodate regional diversity, and this is actually based on the principle of mutual trust and agreement to live together. Remember Belgium, the Dutch speaking, they accepted the French speaking at central level, and similarly Brussels, where the French speaking, the minority, they have accepted the Dutch in the capital city, that is Brussels. So that was actually the mutual trust and the agreement which they have to live together, and this actually the major principle which works here. So federalism is actually based on the principle of mutual trust and agreement to live together. When central government, they have a trust on state government, then only we can think of effective governance of the country. Because India is a very vast country. Not possible for the central government, for the national government alone to govern the entire country, such a vast country with a large population. So they need the help of the state governments and the local governments for effective governance, and that is why, that is the reason we have opted for federalism. It means government at different levels. So we discussed one more very important question, that is the features of federalism. So we have seen 7 important features of federalism. Okay, now different countries, they have a different forms of federalism, they have different roots of federalism adopted in their own country. There are 2 types or 2 roots of federations in different countries. So first we'll discuss coming together federation. Yes? Now what is coming together? See the meaning, come together, when everybody comes together. But here, who are actually coming together? These are nothing but the states. Here, the center and the state governments, they have equal power and they both are independent. What happened? When different state government, they come and join, pool their resources, their sovereignty with the central government, the power of the country will automatically increase. And you know, this system is actually works in USA, Switzerland and Australia. It involves independent states coming together on their own to form a bigger unit. Generally this happens at the time of any calamity or any problem in the country. So every state government, they come and join hands with the state government. They pool their resources, pooling their sovereignty, retaining their identity. They can increase their security. And this system, as I told you, works in USA, Switzerland and Australia. In this, all constituent states usually have equal powers and they are strong in relation to the federal government. Both are equally strong. You can't say that central government is more strong than the state governments. In coming together federation, both levels, center and state, they have equal powers. Okay? Question can be asked, 1 marker, in which country coming together federations work effectively? So that is actually USA, Switzerland and Australia. Okay? This is about coming together federation. Now, second type and second route, very important. Why I am saying important? Because India is having holding together federations. In a large country, they decides to divide its powers between constituent states and national government. Examples, again a very important question. The country is having holding together federations, India, Spain and Belgium. They are its examples. Okay, here the central government or the national government, it is more powerful than the state. But in the coming together, we have seen that the center and the states, they have equal powers. Okay, but in holding together, we find that the center is more powerful than the states. And very often, there are some constituent units of the federation, they have unequal powers, and some units are granted special powers. Okay, like Jammu and Kashmir, they have their own constitution under Article 370. Yes, I'll explain that a little later when we'll discuss how it is practiced in our country. Okay, so we discussed another question, a very important question. Describe the 2 routes for formation of federation in different countries. These are coming together, practiced in USA, Switzerland and Australia. And now in our country we have a holding together federation, India, Spain and Belgium. Okay, so these are the 2 routes or 2 types for formation of federations in different countries.